Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you gave a compliment that truly landed? Not just a polite, "you look nice," but one that made her pause, smile in that unguarded way, and feel seen, really seen. You see, most men think compliments are about flattery, about finding something she's wearing or how her hair looks and pointing it out. But women, especially women who know their worth, can sense when your words are just decoration, the compliments that make a woman lean in, that stay with her long after you've left the room. They come from a completely different place. They're not about what you see on the surface. They're about what you notice that others overlook. In this conversation, I want to take you deep into the subtle art of saying the kind of things that stir her emotions without you even trying to be smooth. Compliments that bypass her defenses, that make her feel connected to you in a way she can't quite explain. This isn't about manipulation. It's about learning the language of appreciation that touches her at the level of her identity, not just her appearance. And once you understand how to speak in that language, she'll feel it, and she won't forget you. There's something deeply human about the desire to be acknowledged, not for what we project to the world, not for the polished version of ourselves, but for what we are in our quietest, most unguarded moments. And yet, so many of us, especially men, miss the opportunity to offer this acknowledgement in a way that actually lands. Think about the last time you looked into a woman's eyes and told her something that made her light up from within. Was it a remark about her beauty, her dress, her smile? Maybe. But here's the truth. She's heard those before, dozens of times, hundreds even. They slide off like rain on glass because they've been said by strangers, colleagues, even men who barely cared to know her name. What she hasn't heard, what she rarely hears, is a compliment that reveals you've actually paid attention, that you've noticed her in a way that tells her you are more than what you show the world. And I see it. This is where the magic begins. Let's talk about the first kind of compliment that opens this door. It's the one that acknowledges her essence, not just her appearance. Imagine saying something like, "There's a calmness about you that makes people feel safe." Or, when you talk about something you love, you make the whole room lean in. You're not praising her makeup, her dress, or her body. You're noticing the energy she brings into a space. And when you do that, you bypass vanity and go straight to identity. This works because most women live in a world where they are constantly appraised for how they look. A compliment on her presence tells her that you see the parts of her that are invisible to most people. You're not seduced by the surface. You're interested in the human being. And that is irresistible. But this leads us naturally into the second compliment, the one that reflects her uniqueness. Not in a generic, "you're special" way, but by noticing a specific detail that others overlook. Maybe you've observed the way she tilts her head slightly when she's curious, or how her laugh starts softly before spilling over into something contagious. These are the small, intimate fingerprints of who she is, and when you bring them into words, it feels like you've unlocked a private truth. Imagine her reaction when you say, the way you pause before answering. It's like you're weighing your words carefully. It makes me want to hear them even more. That's not just flattery. That's insight. And insight is a form of intimacy. It tells her, I notice the parts of you the world rushes past. There's a quiet power in this. Because you're not giving these compliments to get something in return. You're giving them to create connection. And connection, real connection, is magnetic. It makes her want to keep you close, not because you've impressed her, but because you've made her feel recognized. Now, as we move deeper into this art, there's another compliment that many men overlook. Yet it can be even more impactful than the first two. It's the one that affirms her choices. Women, especially those over 30, have spent years making decisions that shape their lives, career moves, friendships, boundaries, personal growth. A compliment that validates those choices speaks to her agency and wisdom. Maybe she's chosen a certain career path, or decided to move to a new city, or walked away from something that didn't serve her. Saying something like, "I admire the way you protect your time," or "It's inspiring how you've built your life around what matters to you," acknowledges her as an architect of her own life. You're telling her, "I see the intelligence in the way you live. Do you know what happens when you do this?" She begins to feel safe in your company, because you're not just appreciating her for what she gives to you, you're appreciating her for what she's given to herself. And that's the kind of man she can respect. The truth is, these compliments are not tricks. They're not lines you memorize to win her over. They are reflections, mirrors you hold up so she can see herself more fully. And in a world where women are so often reduced to appearances or roles, the gift of being truly seen is priceless. I remember working with a couple where the woman told her partner, "I don't need you to tell me I'm beautiful. I know I am. What I want is for you to tell me you notice how hard I'm trying, that you see the little ways I'm growing." That's when it hit him. His compliments had been focused on what was obvious, not on what was personal, and personal is where the intimacy lives. So when you begin to practice these kinds of compliments, essence, uniqueness, and affirmation of her choices, you create an atmosphere where she doesn't feel like she has to perform to keep your attention. She can relax, she can be herself. And paradoxically, that's when she will feel most drawn to you. And the beauty of it, you don't have to force any of this. It's not about trying to come up with the perfect thing to say. It's about being present enough to notice the truth of her and brave enough to put it into words. When you begin to look at a woman through this lens, seeing her essence, her unique traits, and the wisdom of her choices, you start to realize something. The most powerful compliments aren't about embellishing her ego, they're about grounding her in who she already is. And that brings us to a type of compliment that often leaves women quietly moved. It's when you acknowledge her resilience. Not resilience in a dramatic Hollywood sense, but in the everyday ways she has navigated her life. We all carry invisible battles. Some are written on our faces, others are hidden deep, stitched into the fabric of our personalities. When you notice a woman's ability to endure, adapt, or rise from difficulty, you're not just praising her strength. You're telling her, I see the roads you've walked, even if I don't know every detail. Imagine saying, I get the feeling you've been through things that could have made you bitter, but they didn't. You've kept your warmth. Or, you seem like the kind of person who's learned how to stand on her own without losing her softness. These are not compliments you throw out lightly. They require sensitivity, a real listening ear, and the ability to sense the emotional currents beneath her words. But when spoken sincerely, they touch a place that very few people ever reach. Now, let's step into another layer, the compliment that reflects her impact on others. This is different from acknowledging her presence or her choices. This is about showing her the ripple effect she creates in the world. Most of us have no idea how much our actions, even our smallest gestures, affect those around us. When you give her that mirror, you're offering a kind of validation that's rare and deeply nourishing. Maybe you notice how her friends light up when she arrives, or how she has a way of making a tense moment feel lighter. You might say, it's interesting, whenever you walk into a room, people seem to breathe a little easier. Or, I saw how you handled that situation earlier. You didn't just solve the problem, you made everyone feel safe. What you're doing here is anchoring her identity, not just in how she appears or what she chooses, but in the way she changes the atmosphere around her. Why does this matter? Because it speaks to legacy, to the subtle mark she leaves wherever she goes. And for many women, especially those who've spent decades giving to others, family, friends, colleagues, hearing that their presence has a positive impact is like water to thirsty soil. But perhaps one of the most intimate compliments you can give is the one that reflects her inner world, her mind, her ideas, her curiosity. Too often men default to surface-level admiration, forgetting that attraction is as much about intellectual and emotional stimulation as is about physical appeal. When you tell her that you value how she thinks, how she processes the world, you're not just flattering her, you're inviting her to be fully herself with you. It could be as simple as, I like the way you see connections between things most people would never link together, or, talking to you makes me think differently, like you open doors in my mind I didn't know were there. These are compliments that don't fade after the conversation ends. They echo in her mind for days, even weeks, because they affirm the part of her that's uniquely hers. When you give these kinds of compliments, resilience, impact, and inner world, you shift the dynamic entirely. She no longer feels like she has to maintain a facade to keep your interest. Instead, she feels an almost gravitational pull toward you, because being around you makes her feel more alive in her own skin. And there's something else that happens. You stop being just a man she enjoys spending time with. You become the man who reminds her of who she is when she's at her best. And that, my friend, is unforgettable. I've seen this over and over in my work with couples. A woman will say, I don't feel seen. And the man will reply, but I tell you you're beautiful all the time. And she'll shake her head. Because beauty, while nice to hear about, isn't the whole story. She wants to feel that her complexity, her evolution, her depth are not only noticed but cherished. The magic of these deeper compliments is that they work without you trying, in the performative sense. When they come from genuine observation, they carry an authenticity that can't be faked. And authenticity is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. So the next time you're with her, slow down. Listen not just to her words, but to the pauses between them. Watch not just what she does, but how she does it. You'll find an entire universe there waiting to be named. And when you name it, she'll feel that electric jolt of recognition. The kind that keeps her thinking about you long after the night has ended. When you begin to pay attention in this way, you'll notice something subtle yet profound. She starts to relax around you, her shoulders drop, her laugh comes more easily, her words flow with less self-editing. And that's because every time you offer one of these deeper compliments, you're sending the same message in different forms. You're safe here, you're valued for all of you. There's another compliment that few men think to give, yet it can be one of the most powerful of all. It's the compliment that celebrates her growth. not her achievements in the conventional sense, but the way she's evolved as a person. Growth is deeply personal. It often happens in private, in the quiet struggles that no one else sees. When you acknowledge that growth, you're telling her, I see the journey you're on, not just the destination you've reached. You might say, I admire how you've learned to trust yourself more, or you seem lighter than when I first met you. It's like you've let go of something heavy. These observations go beyond the moment. They tell her you've been paying attention over time. Growth compliments are especially potent because they tap into a deep human desire to have our inner work witnessed. Many women carry the weight of self-improvement silently, never fully sure if anyone notices. When you notice, you give her a mirror that reflects not just who she is, but who she's becoming. Closely tied to this is another often overlooked compliment: appreciation for her values. In a world that can feel chaotic, knowing someone respects the principles you live by is incredibly affirming. And here's the secret: values-based compliments are rarely forgotten because they speak to the foundation of who she is. If you've noticed that she always keeps her word, tell her, I love that when you say you'll do something, I can trust it'll happen. If you see that she prioritizes kindness, say, the way you treat people, even when they can't give you anything in return, it says so much about you. You're not just admiring what she does, you're admiring the why behind it. When a woman hears you recognize her values, she feels that you're seeing her at the most unshakable, non-negotiable level of her identity. That's a compliment with roots. It won't fade with time because it's tied to something she's chosen and cultivated. And then there's the final kind of compliment we'll talk about today, the one that many men misunderstand completely. It's the compliment about how she makes you feel. Now, you might think this is obvious. Of course I tell her she makes me happy. But the key here is specificity. The more precisely you can name the emotional shift she brings into your life, the more impact your words will have. Instead of saying, you make me happy, you might say, when I'm with you, I feel like I can exhale, like I don't have to be on all the time. Or, you remind me that joy can be simple, just laughing with someone who gets you. The difference, one is a statement anyone could make to anyone. The other is yours, shaped by your actual experience of her. When you share these feelings with honesty and detail, you're not just telling her she's important to you. You're showing her why. You're making her understand the exact way she inhabits your life, and that's a powerful form of intimacy. At this point, you might be thinking, but won't all of this make me sound too vulnerable, too exposed? And yes, there is vulnerability here, but that's precisely what makes it magnetic. Compliments like these require you to be present, attentive, and willing to put your observations into words. They ask you to step away from the safety of cliches and risk saying something that actually matters. And here's the truth. When a woman senses that your words are grounded in sincerity, not performance, she doesn't hear it as weakness. She hears it as strength. The strength to connect without armor, to recognize without agenda, to give without keeping score. So when you put it all together, the acknowledgement of her essence, her uniqueness, her choices, her resilience, her impact, her mind, her growth, her values, and the way she makes you feel, you're no longer just giving compliments. You're creating a relationship environment where both of you can be fully seen. And in that space, attraction is no longer something you have to generate. It becomes the natural byproduct of connection. The irony is, once you start giving compliments in this way, you stop thinking about how to make a woman fall for you in the traditional sense. You begin to realize that when you show up as a man who truly notices, truly listens, and truly values, the right woman doesn't have to be won over. She will choose you again and again because being around you feels like coming home. I want you to imagine this with me for a moment. You're sitting across from her at a quiet little cafe. There's no background music, just the hum of conversation around you, the clink of cups on saucers. She's telling you about her week, nothing extraordinary, just the details of her work, a small disagreement with a friend, the way she spent her Sunday morning reorganizing her apartment. Most men would nod, throw in a polite, "That's nice," maybe pick up on one or two details to comment on. But you're listening differently. You're watching the way her hands move when she talks about her work, the flicker of emotion when she mentions her friend, the softening of her voice when she describes the quiet of her Sunday morning. And then you say, I love how you find beauty in small things. You talk about reorganizing your apartment like it's a work of art, not a chore. Do you see the difference? You've taken an everyday detail and turned it into a reflection of her inner world. She's not just telling you about her Sunday, she's revealing her relationship with her own space, her own sense of order. And by noticing that, you've shown her you're paying attention to who she is, not just what she does. Here's another scenario. She's standing in front of you, telling a story about a time she almost gave up on something important, but didn't. There's a little self-deprecating laugh, maybe even a shake of her head. And you look at her and say, you know, you're the kind of person who can face something that scares her and still find a way through. That's rare. In that moment, you're not just complimenting her resilience. You're anchoring it in a real example from her life. You're making her see herself through your eyes. and your eyes are showing her strength she might not even fully recognize. The beauty of these moments is that they don't have to be dramatic. In fact, the more ordinary they seem on the surface, the more surprising the compliment feels. She's not expecting you to notice the way she lingers over a decision, or how she remembers the little preferences of her friends, or how she always manages to keep her humor even when she's tired. When you notice those things and put them into words, it's like you're offering her a snapshot of herself she's never quite seen before. And people, men and women, are endlessly fascinated by the parts of themselves they don't yet know. Let's talk about emotional impact for a second. The reason these compliments are so effective is because they carry something most words don't risk. They're not safe, surface-level statements that could be applied to anyone. They're specific, they're vulnerable. They require you to reveal what you actually see and feel, and that opens the door for her to do the same. Think of it like this. Every sincere compliment is an invitation. When you say, "I feel calmer when I'm around you," you're inviting her to reflect on how she affects people. When you say, "I admire the way you've grown since we first met," you're inviting her to think about her own evolution. And when you say, "You make me feel like I can be myself without editing," you're inviting her to step into even deeper authenticity with you. And here's something important. This doesn't just make her feel good in the moment. It plants seeds. Long after the conversation is over, she'll find herself replaying those words in her mind. She might be driving home, brushing her teeth, or lying in bed at night, and suddenly she'll remember the way you said it, the look in your eyes when you noticed something no one else seemed to see. That's when attraction becomes something richer, something anchored in emotional connection rather than fleeting chemistry. I've had women tell me, "I still remember the exact sentence he said, and it's been years," not because it was poetic, but because it was true. That's the heart of it, truth. A true compliment feels like recognition, and recognition is one of the deepest human needs. But there's a subtle skill here. You have to give the compliment without expectation. If you say it hoping for a certain reaction, her to smile a certain way, touch your arm, or lean closer, you lose some of that authenticity. The power is in saying it because you can't not say it, because it's in you and you want her to know. When you operate from that place, you stop playing the impress her game and start playing the connect with her game. And connection, real lived in the moment connection, is infinitely more attractive than any rehearsed line. And here's the beautiful twist. When you live this way, you'll notice that the compliments you give women will naturally spill over into other areas of your life. You'll start seeing your friends differently, your family differently, even strangers differently. You'll start noticing the humanity in people more often. And the more you notice, the more people will feel drawn to you without being able to explain why. Because at the end of the day, the man who can truly see a woman for who she is and has the courage to tell her is the man she remembers. Not the loudest in the room, not the richest, not even the most handsome. The one who saw her and let her know it. At this point, I want you to imagine her again, not in a romanticized movie scene way, but as she really is. Messy hair on a Sunday morning, distracted by something she's reading, or humming quietly while she cooks. She's not trying to impress you. She's simply existing in her own space, unaware of the way the light is falling across her face or how her voice softens when she's focused. And you're paying attention. This is where the magic of everything we've talked about comes alive, because the deepest compliments aren't born in moments of performance, but in moments of truth. When she's just being, and you're just there, and you notice something worth naming. Maybe it's the way she tilts her head when she's curious. Maybe it's the way her eyes flicker when she's processing an emotion she doesn't yet have words for. Maybe it's the way she has learned to protect her peace without hardening her heart, and you let her know. Not with grand speeches, but with simple, honest words. You have this way of making the world feel gentler just by being in it. Or, "I like how you don't rush to fill silence. You make it feel comfortable." These moments aren't loud. They don't require music swelling in the background, but they create an intimacy that lingers far longer than anything flashy or clever could. Because here's the truth, women, like men, long to be recognized, to feel that someone has truly seen them in their full, imperfect, beautifully human self. And when you give that to someone without agenda, without calculation, you create something rare, trust. And trust, that's where real attraction lives. You see, physical chemistry can light a fire quickly, but it's trust that keeps it burning. And the kind of trust we're talking about here doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from the accumulation of small, sincere recognitions over time. From you being the man who notices, who remembers, who speaks what he sees. When you live this way, the way you give compliments changes, not just in content, but in texture. They're no longer tools to get somewhere. They're expressions of who you are. And when that's the case, the women in your life, whether friends, partners, or someone you've just met, will feel it instantly. And I want you to hear this clearly. This isn't about being perfect with your words. It's not about finding the most romantic or most poetic thing to say. It's about presence. It's about attention. It's about the willingness to let someone know the effect they have on you, even if your voice shakes a little when you say it. Because when you strip away all the dating advice, all the strategies, all the so-called rules, what you're left with is connection. And connection doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you choose, again and again, to lean in rather than turn away. I've sat across from countless couples in my work and watched relationships come alive again when one person starts to truly see the other. A man telling his wife of 20 years, "You've become so much braver than when we first met," and watching her eyes fill with tears. A woman saying to her partner, "You make me feel like I can breathe," and watching the tension drain from his shoulders. These moments change people, and you have the power to create them. Not with tricks, not with rehearsed lines, but with the courage to notice and name what is real. So, the next time you're with her, whoever her is in your life, try this. Let yourself slow down enough to see something true. Not just that she's beautiful, but that she's graceful under pressure. Not just that she's funny, but that her humor comes from a deep empathy for people. Not just that she's smart, but that she's endlessly curious about the world. Say it. Let her have that moment of recognition. And then let it go. No fanfare, no waiting for a reaction. Just give it freely and trust that it will land where it needs to. Because in the end, the compliments that make women fall for you without even trying aren't about seduction in the traditional sense. They're about presence. They're about respect. They're about seeing her as a whole person, not an idea, not a conquest, not a role to be filled, and letting her know you value what you see. And when you do that, well, she'll remember. She'll remember the man who didn't just notice her lipstick or her dress, but the way she lights up when she talks about something she loves. She'll remember the man who didn't just admire her success, but the grit it took to get there. She'll remember the man who didn't just hear her words, but listen to the silences between them. And maybe, one day, when someone asks her why she fell for you, she'll smile in that unguarded way and say, "Because he saw me, really saw me." And isn't that the kind of love worth having?